These are some of the images following the early 2000s in Timbuktu, when some of the most important manuscripts held by the librarians who have been holding this type of information written in Ajami and Arabic found themselves all burned. Ironically, the people who were responsible for burning these books 400, 500 years ago, all the way to 600 AD, would have been the people who would have wanted to save them the most. They were Muslims. And not only were they Muslims, but they were radical in their thinking. The radicalists today are scary, and they seem to have no real approach to reality to maintain peace. But the radicals of Islam 600 AD onwards were a little different. They radically wanted to transform the world into its best state. They radically believed that Allah had blessed them so that they could bring civilization, peace, harmony to the world. Now, of course, this didn't come without a price, which was bodies, and of course, they had slavery and everything else. But you can see with manuscripts that are left over, some who have been saved by great librarians like this man here, that these people loved education. Now, this information, as I've showed in other videos, we find Ajami located in Indonesia. We find Arabic scripts located down in Mozambique. We find Mozambican scripts located in Madagascar, and Madagascan scripts located in Portugal. But for some reason, they were burned in this location. Now, conspiracy theorists sometimes blame, only the Western civilization for certain destruction. And it is true that if it wasn't for Western civilization, some of these things would definitely not have happened. But sometimes we have to hold ourselves to the same standard that, if you're in the position, you have to protect your own things. I mean, that's just common sense. If you're in a position, you have to protect your own things. And that's exactly what the Africans did. We saved so many of these books. And one of the things that I actually want to do is probably read one of them in its entirety, probably a short one, but to give the perspective of what these people were thinking. Now, of course, burning of books is not something that is unique to Africa. I mean, the first emperor of China was one of those people who hated some of the ancient information and burnt it. And China sort of suffered something called, I forgot what it was, but it's like the 500 years of cleansing, where every 500 years there would be a new king who would burn books. Luckily, we have places in the world that did not suffer the same fate. Were there some burnings in Ethiopia? Absolutely. Were there Muslims in Ethiopia that didn't like the Christian writings? Absolutely. But, as you can see with these images, the Ethiopians were more than capable of defending themselves. And so the Ethiopian writings that I shall refer to in future videos, especially when we start talking about the Zanj rebellion. Now remember, the Zanj has got nothing to do with Ethiopians. The Ethiopians are not Zanj, but when we talk about the Zanj rebellion, we talk about how some of these Christians found themselves in Ethiopia cheering on the Zanj rebellion because it was a a punch to the nose of Islam. Now remember, the Ethiopians were not against religious diversity, which is one of the questions of how the hell did they survive so long without anybody breaking their strength. They seemed open and friendly, but at the same time willing to defend themselves to the death. The image on screen is actually a pretty interesting one. You can see that it's almost a sea of warriors. Look over there. If you actually concentrate, you can see there's heads sticking up of these waters, where you can see dudes holding spears and guns and stuff like that. Now, I want to remind you that Africa was no slouch when it came to technology, information, and this is why I have to go back to the books, because every now and then I feel people forget that Africa was not in its past tense, and that there are Europeans who write about how advanced it was. It's impossible to fill in gaps. I've got the bigger story of Angola, the bigger story of Melinda, the bigger story of all these places are simple, right? And though there are burnings that happened in Angola, though there are burnings that happened in South Africa and burnings that happened in Mozambique, and not just that, but looting as well, looting that sold some of those books into Europe, we still have European people like this person, Alfred Dapper, a Dutch person. Now, this is different than any of these Portuguese or any of that. This Dutch person fills in a lot of gaps. As you can see with the book that he's holding in front of him, one of the things that he did was detail and draw through etching, draw several images from which today some people are familiar with ancient kingdoms. Interestingly, one of the places that he drew was Luango, Angola, and obviously India, China, and so forth and so on. Japan had already been discovered by the time he was around, but he never went into detail about Japan and he probably didn't know much about it. But looting is looting. And he stole this plaque from Benin. Not only that, he used to buy a lot of objects from Africans and then he brought them to Europe, some of them which are still housed in museums today. So it's not like he was all bad or all good, but he did save some of the images in the past. And I mean, if you look at this thing, this plaque that he took off of the walls of Benin, you can see there that there are holes for tacks, holes for nails, showing you that this was supposed to be hung up on a wall. But not only that, it's like a 3D drawing in a way, because of course it's a relief in a sense, but it's also a statue in a sense. You can see a bunch of people in an army dressed insane, and probably one of the most intense things or one of the most craziest things about these images is how much detail they go into. I mean, if you look at their kilts, you can see that they have all these etchings on them showing you how detailed they are. Even people who paint today don't necessarily show you all the details, but instead rely on smooth shapes. This is probably one of the better looking images that come directly from Africa, and Alfred Draper, or Dapper, is one of the Dutch people who saved these for the future. Again, good and bad. Good in the sense that he saved these and didn't destroy them like so many of these other people did who collected these, and then when it was time, they just melted some of them. But bad in the sense that he took them from one kingdom. And there's also another kingdom that we probably need to talk about, which is the kingdom of Burma. Have you ever heard of that? Let me give you a quick rundown of Burma, the Burma kingdom, which I'm sure most of you have probably never heard of. And this is from Wikipedia. It's in no way close to the detail that happened with the kingdom of Burma, but let's just read it. The Burma kingdom, Ibar or Girabuma, was a polity in the Congo Basin of Boma people around Lake Mai Ndombe. It split from Weni Muji in the 17th century, with tradition holding its founder as Maluma Biemi. It maintained close relations with the Tio kingdom. In the 1640s, the Boma kingdom was said to control 15 kings and to be one of the mightiest kingdoms in Africa. By the end of the 19th century, Boma surpassed Mwenemuji to become the major power in the lower Kasai region. Boma oral traditions collected in 1926 detail how the Boma people have come to inhabit the region following a group of leaders south down the Kwango River to escape their elders, forcing them to work in mines. They settled in the three waves, creating subdivisions in the group. The tale then goes on to detail the conquest of the region by the Ngeli. One of the elders they had fled from, thus giving the leaders of Boma Kingdom, Ngeli Boma, legitimacy by being elders of the original founders, the Ndote of Mwenemuji. Now, as you can see there, Mwenemuji was succeeded by the Congo Free State. The Congo Free State, remember, is that area, that kingdom that was owned by the slave trader from Belgium who forced Africans to control themselves, to be controlled. This tells you how long these people have been in this region, and also tells you how complicated Congo was, which is one of the hardest things to pin down about the Congolese regions and Africa and Kenya and all of that, is that their history is too complicated. Starting, of course, with this image here made by Alfred Draper and his people. You can see in the background what the kingdom of Congo looked like to Alfred Dapper. And right here in the front, you can see this image which has been recreated a lot of times. So some of you have seen recreations. Interestingly, because this is the 1600s, some of the images that came earlier show the Kingdom of Congo as having earlier clothes and no shoes. As you can see here in the 1600s, this guy clearly shows them having boots on and well dressed people. The hats that they're wearing also is reflective of what they're talking about in the earlier writings by Duarte Lopez, where he says that the people in the Kingdom of Congo, atop their head, have a hat similar to that of the Turks. And you can see here that it's drawn. This image may seem like a fantasy type of drawing, but it's not. This is accurate. This was some guy was standing watching. Now, of course, you can see here that they're holding these lamps. They're holding these candle or lamps that are bearing fire. This represents the palm oil, and you can see that they even have candles and stuff on top, at the top of them. This is the difference. This is the difference between how Europeans saw Africans prior to the 1800s, when they needed them to be slaves, when they needed all Africans to be slaves, and when they were trade partners. Because, of course, you do not portray your trade partners in a messed up way. Now, Alfred Draper is one of those people who, when he first comes to Africa, he does not just mention the African places, he cannot ignore Egypt. Remember, I showed you a Muslim scholar, Akash al Dali, who said, there is no way you could come to Africa and not be curious about the pyramids. And that is exactly what Alfred Draper or Alfred Dapper did. This is one of the images that he has depicting the ancient Egyptian pyramids. And of course, we can all talk about how the shape that he is portraying is more close to like the Nubian type of pyramids. The shape is a little off, but you can see there everybody who's new sort of looks Middle Eastern, but everyone who's old, like the statue that is depicted lodged in the ground, is an African. And this again reflects the history or the reality of what people, especially who went to Africa, thought back in the day. Now, we will talk about this guy a lot because he talked about Africa a lot. Just like we talk about Al Masudi a lot, who wrote about Africa about 800 years before Alfred Dapper. Alfred Dapper is from the 1600s. Al Masudi is from 800. Now think about the difference there. We're talking about a difference of about 800 years. Let's let's just cut it down to 1,000 years. 1,000 years of continuity. 1,000 years of them talking about the Swahili coast. 1,000 years of experience. 1,000 years of growth of these kingdoms. This is information that is crucial. This is information that is substantive, healthy, and should change the mind of anyone who cares even a little bit about history. Forget Africa, just history in general.